It started with a knock I didn't hear and a voice I couldn't forget. "Open up, or we'll consider it trespassing." I stepped out on my porch, coffee still steaming in my mug, and saw her standing there like she owned the mountain. Karen, blouse too tight, clipboard in hand, sunglasses the size of hubcaps. Behind her, two guys in bright yellow vests, both built like they bench press threats for a living. The bigger one held a megaphone. "You are occupying property outside regulated residential boundaries. This is your final notice." I raised an eyebrow. "Final notice for what?" Karen shoved a paper toward me. I didn't touch it. "You've got 10 minutes to leave the cabin," she snapped, "or I'm calling 911. Now, I've lived in that valley longer than there's been an HOA sign at the gate. That cabin was my wife's favorite place on earth. I built it with my own hands. And now, some clipboard warrior wanted to boot me out like a squatter? "You go ahead," I told her. "Call whoever you want." She did. I finished my coffee while she paced in the dirt, yelling dramatic things into her phone. Her goons circled the cabin, taking pictures like it was some kind of crime scene. The taller one even tried to peek through the windows. 15 minutes later, the flashing lights rolled up. Two sheriff's deputies stepped out. Young, nervous. One of them rested a hand on his holster. That told me everything I needed to know. Karen ran up to them, waving her arms. "He's squatting! He's threatening us! I'm the HOA chair. I have authority here." The deputies asked for my ID. I gave it to them. They asked if I had a weapon. "Rifle in the shed, registered. Never loaded unless there's a mountain lion problem." They nodded, talked amongst themselves, then handed back my license. "Sir, for now, we're asking you to vacate the property temporarily until we can verify the land use permissions." "You're asking," I said, "not telling." Karen stormed up. "Are you kidding me? This man is in violation. He's dangerous." One deputy turned to her. "Ma'am, unless you have a court order, we can't remove him by force, but we strongly recommend—" "I'm not going anywhere," I cut in. "If you want to drag me out, you better bring more than 2 rookies with flashlights." The taller deputy blinked, then looked down. Karen clenched her jaw so hard, I thought her veneers might snap. But they left, told me it'd go in a report, told her she could file a formal complaint. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You're damn right it's not," I muttered. You ever been publicly humiliated by someone who thinks they're the law? That was just the opening act. Next morning, I woke up to concrete blocks at the bottom of my trail. Big ones, cinder, fresh. Someone had hauled them in overnight and sealed off the only drivable path to my cabin. Spray painted across them, "Private HOA zone. Trespassers will be fined." I stood there barefoot, staring at the message, trying not to let the anger rise up and choke me. Let me tell you something. Anger's like gasoline, useless unless you know where to throw the match. But that morning, I didn't have a plan, just a backpack, a problem, and a rising sense that this was going to get worse before it got better. And brother, I was right. That roadblock wasn't the end. It was only the start of something nastier. I took one last look at those cinder blocks, then turned back toward the cabin, already thinking through what I'd need for the long way out. And just like that, the valley turned into a war zone. If you've ever been forced out of your home by smug, clipboard-holding tyrants, you know the feeling. And if you haven't, stick around. Because what happened next, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't lived it myself. I hiked into town that day with a pack full of empty thermoses, tools, and a whole lot of bad ideas. The sun was already up, beating down on my back like it wanted a piece of me, too. The road was long, dusty, and quiet, until it wasn't. About halfway down, I passed 3 HOA trucks parked just off the tree line. Same logo as before, that smug pine tree inside a fake gold circle. One of the guys from the porch was leaning on his hood, eating a sandwich like it was just another Tuesday. He grinned when he saw me. "Long walk, huh?" I didn't answer, didn't trust my mouth to keep things civil. At the bottom of the trail, the local supply shop had their usual open sign flashing. I stepped in, grabbed fuel cans, rope, and a new tarp. When I got to the register, the kid behind the counter, young, curly hair, decent boots, scanned my stuff, then paused. "Hey, you're that guy, right? From the cabin?" I gave a slow nod. He leaned in. Manager said we're not supposed to sell you anything related to unauthorized land use. I blinked. Is that right? He looked uncomfortable. Said it came from the HOA. I'm sorry, man. I left the stuff on the counter and walked out with fists clenched and nothing to show for the hike but blisters. Now I wasn't just a problem. I was a pariah. That's when I stopped at the bar. You know the kind? Wooden stools, dusty taps, a jukebox that hasn't worked since never ate. I sat down, and before I could order, the bartender looked me up and down. You're Earl from the cabin. Not a question. I nodded. Got anything cold that won't make me angrier? She didn't smile. Sorry, Karen put you on the no-serve list. I let out a breath. That even legal? She shrugged. Nobody cares if it is. Now listen, I've been insulted, injured, and ignored before. Comes with living long enough. But that moment, that was different. That was isolation, manufactured, engineered, like they wanted me to feel small enough to walk away on my own. And for a second, I almost did. I sat on that bar stool a full 5 minutes after she walked away, just staring at the dust on the counter. My stomach was in knots, my pride was cracked, and for the first time in years, I felt like that 20-year-old kid who'd gotten kicked off his own porch during a foreclosure he didn't deserve. But just when you think you're alone, my phone buzzed. One name, Uncle Jim. Now, if you've never met a man who smells like diesel, curses like a poet, and can rebuild a carburetor while smoking a cigar, then you haven't met my uncle. Got your message, he said. Heard you pissed off a whole homeowner association. More like they pissed on me. He laughed. Want some company? I didn't answer. He already knew. Next day, he rolled up in his battered truck. Rust on the sides, and a winch bolted to the front like a metal snarl. First thing he said wasn't hello. It was, where's the problem? I pointed. He spat on the ground. We're gonna need a bigger wrench. And just like that, I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The thing is, a man like Jim doesn't come quietly. He brings noise. He brings grit. And when he stands next to you, you start to believe maybe you're not crazy for refusing to back down. Have you ever had someone show up for you when the rest of the world turned its back? That was the first time in days I didn't feel like the last man in the valley. But if I thought things were turning around, I hadn't seen what Karen had planned next. And it was about to get personal. We got to work like the world was on fire. Jim backed his truck right up to the edge of the concrete blockade like it was a game of chicken. He looked at the spray-painted warning on the blocks, private HOA zone, and chuckled. Hope they spelled it right at least. He popped open the tailgate and started unloading gear like a man on a mission. Pry bars, chains, a gas-powered cutter that looked like it hadn't been used since Nixon. We weren't exactly a demolition crew, but we didn't have to be. We just needed to remind the valley who really belonged there. The plan was simple. Clear a path, fix the generator, restock, reinforce the porch. Rebuild from the inside out. No court filings, no debates. Just grit and time. And the valley gave us both. We spent the day elbow deep in oil and sawdust. Jim swore every 5 minutes, like punctuation. I hadn't smiled in a week, but watching him argue with a rusty bolt made me laugh out loud more than once. Funny thing is, I almost forgot about Karen. Almost. Because just after sundown, while we were sitting on the porch eating chili out of old mugs, we heard the unmistakable rumble of heavy tires on dirt. Jim put down his spoon. You expecting company? I shook my head. We both stood up as headlights flared between the trees. 2 big rigs, flatbeds, crawling slow. They pulled up just short of the barricade. And then, the sound of hydraulics. A backhoe slid off the trailer like a predator stretching its legs. Karen got out of a Jeep behind them, in heels and a scarf, like she was showing real estate instead of staging a siege. She didn't say a word to us, just waved at the driver and pointed toward the ridge. I stepped down off the porch. What the hell is this? She smiled like I'd just complimented her dress. We're preparing the site for future recreational infrastructure. You should have read the community bulletin. Jim stepped forward. This ain't your land. She didn't even look at him. It's common space, and the association has rights to improve it. You're welcome to file an objection, if you find a mailbox. And then she turned and walked away like we were background noise. I watched as the machines moved. They weren't clearing brush. They were carving a perimeter, right up against my cabin. Trees fell, dirt kicked up. One of them clipped the side of my woodpile. "You believe this?" I muttered. Jim pulled a cigar from his shirt pocket and lit it with a battered Zippo. "I've seen worse, but only in war zones." He didn't mean that metaphorically. By morning, half the tree line was gone. They'd run floodlights through the night, like they wanted us to know. They could keep going long after we needed rest. I stood there, boots in the mud, and felt something twist in my gut. This wasn't about land, not anymore. This was a campaign. She wanted to choke me out, break me down, make the valley so unlivable I'd give it up just to breathe again. I looked at Jim. He was standing quiet, watching the horizon like it owed him answers. And for the first time since all this started, I didn't know what to do. Have you ever felt the ground shift under you? Not literally, but deep in your chest? Like someone rewrote the rules while you weren't looking? Because right then, standing in the wreckage of trees I used to climb as a boy, I felt like I'd already lost. We spent the rest of the day trying to look busy, reinforcing the cabin walls, patching the tool shed. But our eyes kept drifting to the clearing where the machines were still idle, quiet and waiting, like wolves with keys in the ignition. Jim didn't say much that night, just passed me a beer and nodded toward the stars. Then he said, "Let her think she's winning. It'll make the turn hit harder." "What turn?" I asked. He didn't answer, and somewhere inside me, I hoped he was bluffing. But I was wrong, because what came next was exactly what broke me. I woke up choking on smoke. Not the kind you see, the kind you smell first. Burnt oil, scorched plastic, maybe a hint of pine. The cabin wasn't on fire, but the shed was close. I stumbled outside, heart hammering. The air was thick. My hands found the garden hose before my brain caught up. Jim was already there, shirtless, slapping at flames with a wet blanket like a lunatic. It wasn't a big fire, not yet, but it was enough. We got it out fast, just singed edges, but the message, that was loud and clear. Right there, on the side of the shed, someone had carved a word with spray paint. Gone. Jim stood beside me, panting, streaked with soot. This wasn't random. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I already knew. Let me tell you something, and I want you to really hear this. There's a moment when someone pushes too far, where something in you just flips, a switch you didn't even know existed. That morning, standing in ash and gasoline, I felt the switch flip. We didn't go to the sheriff. We didn't file a complaint. We started packing. Only it wasn't the kind of packing Karen thought we'd be doing. We loaded the truck, tools, chains, a battered old jack, and a cooler full of melted ice and stubbornness. Jim pulled out an old map and pointed to a line barely visible near the creek bed. "Old trail," he said, "used to run behind the ridge before the HOA even existed. If we clear it, we can flank the blockade without touching a single inch of their so-called property." I looked at him. "You sure it's still passable?" He grinned. "Nope, but we've got chainsaws." We spent the next 2 days hacking through brush like we were fighting the woods themselves. Mosquitoes, roots, thorny vines that seemed to aim for your neck. And we did it in silence, not the quiet kind, the focused kind, the kind that meant we're doing this or we're dead. By the end of day 2, my back felt like it had been stomped by a buffalo. Jim's hands were shaking, but he didn't stop. "Tomorrow," he said, "we punch through." He was right. On the third morning, we broke through the last thicket, and there it was, the old fire trail, overgrown but intact, winding around the back of the ridge, past an abandoned fence line, and down into the back pocket of my land. No cameras, no gates, no Karen. We'd found the back door, and we weren't gonna knock. That night, we didn't speak much, just sat under the stars, sipping whatever was left in the cooler, and sharpening tools we hadn't touched in years. I caught myself staring at the outline of my cabin against the night sky, knowing the front porch still had Karen's footprint on it from the day she tried to barge in. I wasn't just taking back a building. I was taking back my name. But here's the thing. When you prepare for war, you expect resistance. What I didn't expect was the ambush. Because while we were busy cutting a trail, Karen had moved on to something lower. Something human. And when I saw what she'd done, I didn't see red. I saw nothing. Because rage that deep, it goes quiet. They didn't burn anything this time. No, this time, Karen chose something colder. When we got back to town, me, mud-soaked and limping, Jim with a busted knuckle and a grin, I figured we'd grab gas and disappear again. But the minute we pulled up to the pump, the store lights went dark. Not literally. I mean, the clerk flipped the switch on us. Sign in the window, closed for inventory. Only it wasn't closed for anyone else. I watched a family of 4 walk right in behind me. Jim stared at the clerk through the glass. "You think this guy's got a death wish?" I told him to let it go. We moved on. Then we hit the diner. I needed real food, something hot, something that didn't taste like a rusted cooler. Same deal. "Sorry," the waitress said, without looking me in the eye. "Karen told us you threatened HOA staff. We can't have you in here." I opened my mouth to argue, closed it again. Because what's the point in yelling when the whole town's already wearing earplugs? Jim clapped me on the shoulder. "She's not just playing dirty, she's playing smart." That night, we drove to the other side of the county to get fuel and groceries. 3 hours round trip, just to fill a gas can and buy coffee. And when we got back, that's when I saw it. Someone had nailed a sign to my porch. Not taped, not tacked, nailed. Big white letters on black paint. Community. Alert dangerous trespasser, occupying non-zoned property. Do not engage. I stood there staring at it like it was in another language. Jim ripped it off with one yank. This ain't just bullying. This is narrative control. He was right. Karen had figured out the only thing worse than being hated was being feared. She wasn't trying to evict me anymore. She was trying to erase me. Yeah, and you know what? It almost worked. Because that night, I sat on my porch in the dark with a cold sandwich and a busted lighter, and I thought, maybe I am the crazy one. Maybe I should just walk away. Let her have her HOA, her fences, her concrete blocks. Who was I really fighting for? But then, and I swear to you, I heard a sound that snapped me clean out of that spiral. Boots. On gravel. I looked up and saw headlights coming down the hill. It wasn't Jim. It was a woman, tall, gray ponytail, wearing a windbreaker with a logo I hadn't seen since the 90s. Behind her, 2 more figures, one of them holding a toolbox. They parked, stepped out, and stood like they knew exactly whose land they were on. "Mr. Haywood?" she asked. I stood. "That's me." She extended a hand. "Name's Beth. I'm a contractor, independent. I heard what's happening here, and I don't like bullies." I didn't move. She continued, "You still got a generator?" I nodded. She smiled. "Good, let's fix it." Turns out, Jim had made some calls. Quiet ones. Real quiet. Not to cops, not to reporters. 2 people. People who had been steamrolled by Karen before. Folks who used to live in HOA zones and left with scars. Financial, legal, personal. They weren't an army, but they were pissed. And they came to help. By morning, I had a new fuel line, rewired fuses, and enough power to run lights, radio, and my fridge. Beth and her crew worked like a volunteer rescue team. No talk, just action. They didn't ask for thanks, didn't ask for pay. They just looked at me and said, "Don't let her win." That's when I realized this fight wasn't just mine anymore. It never really was. Have you ever seen a moment so clear it cuts through every doubt in your head? That was it for me. So I stood up, dusted off my jeans, and said the words I hadn't said in days. Let's push back. We started with the trail, widened it, cleaned it, laid down gravel where the mud used to swallow tires. Then we reinforced the shed, built a fire pit, added solar lights along the path. We made the place look lived in, safe, visible. Because fear thrives in darkness, but light makes people ask questions. And Karen hated questions. By the end of the week, 3 more folks stopped by. One brought firewood, one brought a water barrel, one just said, "My cousin had to sell their house because of her." They didn't stay, but they saw, and that meant everything. Karen must have felt the shift. Because what she did next wasn't clever, wasn't sneaky. It was loud, violent, and almost ended everything. But not in the way she expected. She came at dawn. No warning, no threats, just roaring diesel, shouting, and the sound of steel teeth tearing into dirt. Jim was already up, boiling coffee over the fire pit. When he heard it, I came running out with one boot on, heart pounding, and nearly stumbled into the shovel of a backhoe chewing up the fence post at the edge of my property. 3 machines, 2 trucks, Karen standing in the center of it all with her arms crossed and a look like she'd just bought the whole damn valley at auction. "You can't be here," I yelled, already halfway across the yard. She didn't answer, just pointed. The guy in the hard hat called out, "HOA development, pre-cleared, stay back." I stepped into his path. "I'm standing on my land. If you touch another inch..." He gunned the engine, and I swear to you, for a split second, I thought he was going to run me over. But then he stopped, inches from my knees, and smirked. Jim stood beside me, calm, too calm. Then he said, "Let her do it." "What?" He looked at me sideways. "Let her overreach. They always do." I wanted to punch something, but I stepped back. The machines moved forward. They tore through the trail we'd cleared, crushed the fire pit, snapped the frame of the tool shed like it was a twig. Beth and her crew showed up an hour later. They didn't say a word, just stood there, watching the damage unfold. One of the trucks dropped off pallets labeled Future HOA Resource Center. I nearly laughed. "Resource Center?" Jim muttered. "Is that what they call land theft these days?" And then, as if the gods of chaos hadn't had their fill, the rain came. Hard, sudden, cold. The machines stopped. The men covered equipment. Karen ducked into her Jeep, dry and satisfied. But we stayed, soaked, silent. That night, the cabin felt hollow. The shed was gone. The trail was rutted out. And something in me, something I didn't know I was still carrying, cracked. I sat in the dark while Jim played solitaire on an ammo box. Beth wiped her glasses with her shirt and said, "We'll rebuild." I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure I believed it. That night, I walked into the woods. Just me, no flashlight, no jacket. The trees were wet and whispering. My boots sank in the mud. I kept walking until I reached the edge of the old creek bed, the one I used to fish with my dad when I was 10, the same one my wife stood by when she told me this land made her feel alive. I dropped to my knees in the wet moss and let the rain fall. I don't know how long I stayed there, but when I stood up, I felt different. Cold, empty, and sharp. Because when someone takes everything from you, the shed, the trail, the respect, they don't expect you to come back with nothing left to lose. But that's exactly what I did. The next morning, I didn't drink coffee. I sharpened tools. I cleared what was left of the trail. And I started building something I hadn't touched since before she came. A sign. Big, wooden, hand-carved. It said one word. "Stay." Jim looked at it, then at me. "You sure?" I nodded. "No more moving, no more hiding. If she wants a line in the dirt, I'll give her one she won't forget." That evening, I hammered it into the ground, right at the edge of the rubble where my tool shed used to be. Not in anger, not in protest, just finality. And then I sat on the porch and waited, because I knew Karen wasn't done. But neither was I. I didn't sleep that night, not a wink. Not because I was scared, nah, I've seen worse, but because I could feel the pressure building like a storm trapped behind my ribs, like something was about to snap. By 5 a.m., I was back outside with a cup of black coffee and boots still muddy from yesterday, and I'll be damned, there it was. A convoy of 3 pickups crawling up the gravel road like ticks looking for blood. One of them had orange lights spinning. Another had a trailer with what looked like cement barriers. The last one, filled with HOA folks in polos and clipboards, led by Karen and her freshly ironed smirk. You ever see someone walk up like they already think they've won? That was her, chin up, chest out, like she was headed to her own parade. I didn't move from my porch, just took a sip of coffee. Karen pointed at my gate, now swung open with my own handmade sign, "Stay," spray-painted across a sheet of rusted tin. "Mr. Dawson, you are officially trespassing," she said, loud enough for her little audience. "We have jurisdiction now." "Funny," I said. "Didn't see your name on the deed when I bought this land." The HOA guys started unloading the barriers. Karen marched forward, holding a printed document like it was the Bible. "I have authorization from the township to reclaim the road. As of this morning, it's public again." I stepped off the porch, one step, just enough to let them know I wasn't bluffing. Public road, huh? That why you brought a private security guard? Behind her, a guy in black tactical gear stepped out of the truck. Not a cop, not even pretending. No badge, just muscle. Karen didn't answer. The guard stayed near the truck but watched me like I was a problem he wanted to solve. You think you're scary? I said, eyes locked with hers. You think you're just gonna bully people till they give up? I think, she said, people like you don't know when to quit. She turned to her men. Block the road, start moving equipment, get ready for demolition. Demolition. There it was. No more pretense. She was going to tear down my cabin. That wasn't just spite, that was war. I didn't yell, didn't cuss. I just went back inside. Slow, calm, every step like I'd rehearsed it in my head. Because here's the thing. When someone shows you who they are, you stop giving them chances. You start planning. I sat at my little kitchen table, pulled out the notebook I hadn't touched in years. Maps, measurements, a few names from way back, people who owed me favors, or still remembered what I did for them. I made 2 calls, that's it. Then I walked outside, right into the mess. My driveway was gone, covered in steel and orange cones. My mailbox was on the ground. One of their guys had the nerve to be sipping coffee like he lived there. But what got me? They were setting up a porta potty, like this was going to be a long-term occupation. I walked straight to Karen. You sure you want to do this? Oh, it's done, she said, and you're going to move, one way or another. I smiled. You ever smile when you feel the burn in your chest? Not anger, something deeper, like your soul saying, enough. That smile, it wasn't for her, it was for me. Because I knew who was on the way. And the thing about small towns, when you mess with one man's land, you might just stir up a whole damn county. I didn't need a lawyer. I needed a witness. And about 30 of them were already on the road, coming in pickups, on bikes, on horses. That's when Karen's face started to change. And I swear to you, she didn't look so smug anymore. I didn't plan a big speech, just nodded to the guys as they got out of their trucks. Randy, Pete, even old Glenn with his limp and his pickup full of tools. No need to talk. They saw the mess and knew what it meant. Karen and her entourage weren't expecting an audience, especially not one with crowbars and welding torches. One of the HOA board guys stepped forward, trying to keep his voice official. Sir, this is a formal notice to vacate and clear the structure. You have 48 hours. I didn't flinch. Then you better start your clock. They didn't like that. Karen crossed her arms. This will be reported. You are interfering with a legal process. But she wasn't shouting anymore, not with 10 men behind me, tools in hand, waiting. Funny thing about bullies, they get real quiet when they realize they're outnumbered. So, what happened next? We went to work. Not to destroy anything. Not yet. We just started undoing what they tried to build, tore out the orange stakes, pulled up the signs, moved the blocks. The HOA lawyer returned an hour later with a deputy sheriff, smug like he'd brought a loaded gun to a slingshot fight. Deputy took one look at the scene, squinted at me. You the owner here? I am. You got papers? I handed him the envelope, the real one, with the updated parcel map, the court order blocking the construction, and the new easement revoking HOA road access. The deputy flipped through it, then looked at the lawyer. This your client? Lawyer stammered. Well, the HOA has been advised. You advised them wrong. He handed the folder back to me. Looks like he's clean, and you... He pointed to the lawyer. Better stop whatever circus this is. Karen stepped forward, red-faced. You can't be serious. We have permits. Deputy shrugged. Then take it up with the court. I'm not arresting anybody for pulling up cement blocks on their own land. That was the crack. It didn't break all at once, but things started to wobble. The HOA lost credibility. Members started asking questions. Some backed out entirely. And me? I didn't sue, didn't grandstand, just did the one thing they never expected. I opened the land, turned the whole disputed zone into a public picnic space. No fences, free parking, invited local vendors. Families started showing up. Retirees brought folding chairs. Kids ran around. Suddenly, Karen's narrative about rules and property values looked like what it was: control. By month's end, the city council called a vote to revoke HOA's jurisdiction over the rural buffer zone. And it passed. Karen didn't show up to the meeting, but I heard she moved 2 months later. Funny how it works. You push hard enough, some folks push back harder. So, if you're dealing with your own HOA nightmare, maybe don't go to war. Maybe just invite the neighborhood over for barbecue. Thanks for listening. This was Karenology.